Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Kyle Crone, Senior Manager of Regional Marketing at Exclaimer, and I'll be moderating this session. We're here to talk about marketing predictions for 2026, but before we get into what's changing, it's worth explaining why this conversation matters now. Many marketing teams are seeing the same pattern. Buyers are doing more on their own. AI and automated content is impacting the buyer journey, and decisions are being made earlier, with far less tolerance for anything that feels unclear or inconsistent. That's the context for today's session. I'm joined by Jenny Herbison, our Senior Vice President of Global Marketing. Jenny leads Exclaimer's global marketing strategy and spends a lot of time looking at how buyers form opinions long before they ever speak to sales, especially in environments where trust, clarity, and consistency matter. Jenny, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to get into this with you.
With that in mind, let's start by looking at why expectations feel higher and why this moment matters for how marketing teams prepare for the year ahead. All right, let's jump in. So, Jenny, let's get into it. How do you think 2026 is going to differ from previous years?
Oh gosh. Well, really getting to the crux of the webinar right there, Karen. I think for me, we've talked a lot about AI as marketers for probably a few years now, haven't we? We've talked about how much it's really going to change things. And I think for me personally, this is the year that it goes from being maybe used across the team, maybe a bit ad hocly, some people maybe being super users, other people, using it less, to actually really starting to become in at the heart from a structural and functional point of view. I know that we're doing a lot of work ourselves in actually looking at how we're going to adopt AI a lot more strategically and structurally into the team. And it's not just marketing that we're doing that with. You've got to think about it for the whole of go-to-market. So we're pairing up with our colleagues in sales and RevOps to really understand actually how do we start to drive this through from a funnel-based approach. So that's that. I think that's the first one for me that feels really different in 2026.
That certainly feels like a shift from 2025. Can you tell us more about how customers are buying?
Yeah, I think that's the next one for me, where I know that when you come into a company and you want to set it up and you really want customers to come through in a certain journey that suits you, suits your business needs, how you want to track, how you want to get them through in an efficient way to purchase. And I think that's a big shift as well. I think customers are absolutely going to be in control of how they want to buy. And again, I think AI is what has unlocked that for them. I know, for our customers, we're starting to look at actually how do they want to buy at a really granular level and making sure we're giving them the right information to help them do that.
Yeah, we're really starting to see this play out when we're speaking to customers about how they hear us about us, and the LLMs are coming up more and more in their role in the customer journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where once they're starting to be more in control, it's very much customer led in how you're approaching this. It means that trust is more important than ever. You've got to signal that from the start. You've got to be really authentic with what you're saying, with your messaging. You've got to really raise the bar, I think, in your communications and ensuring that everything coming from your org is really controlled and compliant. And actually, I think that's probably something else we'll talk about today is how that's really shifting. And it really is AI at the heart of all of this, again, in how we communicate with AI coming into, how people use that from a communications, from a business point of view. That means that marketers need to really consider how they approach doing that in the future as well. So I think those are my main key focus areas for especially for what we're doing at Exclaimer.
Got it. Okay, so then for prediction one, we're going to say customer-led buying is now the rule. So
Yeah.
most teams say they support customer-led buying, but in practice, many still design journeys around what's easiest for the business. From what we're seeing, Jenny, where does that gap usually show up?
I think the way I've seen it is when you build out a customer journey, especially when the website and anything self-serve is put in place and you've got a sales team, you start to build that out of how you need the customer to interact with you as a business. But I think we need to start to shift that and actually starting to give the buyers the choice and making sure that you're really starting to build out those self-serve paths more than those sales-led ones, if I'm honest. The trials really need to work harder for the customers and be really real decision tools for customers as well. So they can understand that they can go and get the information that they need at the right time is really, really important. And I think that is the bit that's going to really change. And it's taking away those control points that businesses put in. It's like forcing people down into the wrong moments, I think is also going to be really, really key because that means that people will drop off. Progress is going to stall because you're starting to force them into, something that they don't want to do. And I know myself, when I go through a sales journey, when I'm looking at a tool, if I'm starting to force it into maybe talking to someone before I'm ready, because I don't want to get, maybe my intent isn't where they think it is just because I have done something on a website that they think I'm showing more intent than what I am. And it means that what we're seeing is actually that people are starting to go out of the customer journey with the business and go and talk to their peers. How many of us as marketers are in WhatsApp groups with peers or going to AI and asking AI's opinion because they're probably being forced into journeys that are making them a little bit uncomfortable and they wanted to start to make their own decisions and really self-serve on a lot of that decision making themselves. And I think that when they do want to come and speak to you, I think they know what they want to ask, and I think that's the point where you can really authentically help them at that point. And I think that's the bit where I think you just got to be a little bit careful.
That's interesting because a lot of teams think they're removing friction when they're actually shifting it.
Yeah.
Where do you see marketing making it harder for buyers to move forward on their own terms?
Oh, that's a really good one. I think we're just not putting that critical information front and center when it's needed. I think we are not being clear enough. I don't know how many times you go to a homepage and you just can't work out what a business does. And I think that's the bit is really start to understand what do the customers need to know and start to put that in there. So, for example, for us, a lot of our customers need to know about security. They need to understand when they're going to build Exclaimer into their tech stack, how that's going to be, how they're going to set it up, how safe it's going to be. We're integrating with their email systems. It's really important that security is at the heart of that. So we have to get that information front and center and making sure that, they can progress without having to really chase those answers, really work hard to find out where that information is on how they set up and how the security looks as well. I think another blocker is probably procurement. I think getting some of that information, as self-serve as well, I think is a really interesting one that really does allow customers to go, okay, yeah, I've got all of the detail that I can start to actually fill in procurement myself, and this company has everything. It's starting to tick all the boxes that I need as well. I think the other one is the way we do trials, and I don't think I think everyone can probably feel guilty of this one as well. I mean, we probably again don't really understand what our customers need in a trial. And actually, sometimes we'll do a trial which is one size fits all, even though you've got maybe different personas as a company. So it's making sure that actually, does the trial give the information to a customer? Do you need something before that on the website, which just allows them to have a bit more of a play around rather than a trial that where you need to set up everything before, and it adds a lot of friction into that. And maybe just a little bit of guidance of what the good outcomes will look like from a trial as well. Just because I know people are even uncertain about putting email addresses in to start trials. So how can you ungate that and get people to have a bit of a play about, get the information they need further up there. And I think that's really important as well. And I think the last thing in that area where you can help out a little bit is just getting that support, further up, making sure that that help, if people want to know, maybe they can't find the information that they need, where it's just easier for them to maybe have a chat bot on the website. We have that where you can just go and maybe ask some questions without going, okay, this, I'm going to have to give my email address, someone's going to contact me, all that kind of stuff. And just, the conversations can feel a bit more forced then, and you start to push them into, right, you're going to start answering the questions that we can take you as a lead through this process, as opposed to, I just actually wanted some content. I just need you to be helpful. And I think that's where it needs to shift as well.
Okay, so what I'm gathering is when customer-led buying works well, it's not faster, it's clearer.
Yeah.
What actual changes when teams design for confidence instead of speed?
I think what happens then, and I mean, all of us have looked at for software in every role that we do, and I think you just move forward with a bit more confidence, don't you? You start to go and get the information you need, so it just means that you can start to make decisions. You feel a little bit safer about it. And actually it means that when they do get to the point where they want to speak to a salesperson because they're really interested in buying, and that's when we want them to speak to a salesperson to help them get through, the buying process. They've just got fewer questions because they've done all of that research themselves. They've done all of that questions and they've been able to answer them as well. And it also means that when you do get to that point of wanting to purchase, you're very confident in that. So there's just less backtracking, and there's a bit more confidence when the sales team do get leads at that point that they know that those leads are absolutely ready to buy. And I think. The other thing is, I do think when you build these out, it is work, but I think once you can build these journeys out, and you can measure them, it's a great story to take internally as well. You can take that up to stakeholders, you can show the conversion rates coming through as well. And I think that's really key, and that's a big change for, I think, marketing teams and what it looks like as well. And I think the last thing is probably, I think people go and tell people when they've had a good journey, don't they? I think, they will go if someone is asking in one of those WhatsApp community groups or Reddit or wherever people are. People will go, oh, actually, I went and bought for this and it was a good experience. Because I think that is what people are talking about now, if they are having a good experience when they're purchasing or not. And sometimes for some companies, especially, it can come down to table stakes. I don't know about you, but when I'm looking at some marketing software, they can all look really, really similar. And let's be honest, sometimes it's actually when someone partners with you instead of trying to sell to you to help you, get to the solution you need with the software. That's what really matters, and that's what you're going to tell people when you've had a really positive experience through that process.
Okay, so if there's one mindset shift marketing teams need to make as they plan for 2026, what is it?
For me, it's you've got to start designing for how buyers want to buy and how they decide and how they make their decisions. Just assume they can do it themselves. They can confirm whatever they need themselves. They can remove that doubt, instead of really trying to create a sense of urgency by forcing them through a journey before they're ready. Let them do it in the time that works for them. And actually, I think giving them the information will speed that up naturally, anyway. And just get all of those customer journey paths up to a really good quality level, making sure that everybody coming through, most companies have different segment sizes, they have different personas. So just build out each path as clearly as possible and making sure that experience is, as good as it can be in the way that those, different segment sizes needed by, like someone from like a solopreneur or an SMB customer usually maybe just wants to self-serve and be able to, ask and get a few questions answered. Enterprise customers, procurement, they need a whole different style of, how they buy. So just making sure that each journey is designed to enable the customer, not the business.
And I think that's actually a perfect segue into our second prediction, which is trust is designed in from the first click. Okay, so once buyers are in control of how they move, the next thing they do is validate who they're dealing with. And that validation doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens quietly across small interactions. So, Jenny, where do you see trust breaking down earliest, often without teams even realizing it's happening?
I think just don't put in those claims that everyone can see through. I think buyers are becoming a lot more savvy. And I think I used this yesterday in a meeting where I talked about, all companies are sticking that they have AI built in and everything like that. And it feels a little bit to me like when you're starting to get to the point of, well, everything in the supermarket now is packed full of protein, as well. And I think buyers are becoming more savvy. They don't quite believe everything. They're going to go do their research. They're going to go to LLMs. They're going to go to ChatGPT and go, they've made this claim. Is it true? People are really starting to do their due diligence a lot more. So just be really careful. You're not putting in reasons for buyers to hesitate. To put in any uncertainty or anything like that. So that clarity is really, really important, and making sure that you understanding that journey, making sure you're getting that information very clearly up there, it is really important. And just so those things don't turn into questions, those little things that they don't quite understand or don't add up for them. Especially like we have a very technical persona. We have IT people coming in. So if we put on that, make a claim that just doesn't stack up to them, that's going to make them really nervous because they need us to be able to set up security within their email systems. And if we say anything that could erode that trust or doesn't fit into that, we have to be very, very careful of that. So I think, knowing your persona and making sure you're not making some maybe marketing claims that aren't true, and just being really clear on what you can and can't do. I think pretending you can do everything and pretending you're the perfect solution for everyone, that will erode trust as well. Because if you think about it, if you partner and go, look, we believe we are the right solution for you, we are the right solution for, 80,000 customers, but let us really understand your problem and making sure that our solution does stack up and does really fit that. And I think that's how you start to build trust when you're really starting to, do that. And I think that's really helpful. And anything that is inconsistent, you've got to go through your content, use AI to do this, but you really need to make sure that you've no inconsistencies of, especially with, those security checks or procurement checks that customers are going through in the buying journey. Making sure even things down to tone or just presentation, or like if you've done a rebrand, making sure all of that is taken the right way through. All these little things matter because actually if you can't look after the small details of within your journey, how can they trust you to maybe look after something as important as their email systems with email signatures?
And that's worrying because most teams assume they'll know when trust is at risk. Where do you see marketing teams overestimating how reassuring their actual setup is?
Ooh, okay. Um, I think it's the security and compliance details. And I think that's really, really important. And I think, that's the bit where you've just got to really be on top of that. If you're not clear on that kind of stuff and don't have all of that set up, I think that's where you start to, getting the risk creeping in. I think if we're going to go to, I mean, this is really within our wheelhouse of what we do at Exclaimer, but I think, even those everyday communications have to be really good. We've got AI coming in. We've got bots coming in. We've got all of that kind of stuff coming in. And I think that's where risk really starts to come in your communications. It's getting really fragmented. Being able to control how you talk as a company through all of the different communication channels that you have, all the different connections that you have. I mean, think about even the Slack connections or, different things like that you have, and you're communicating to customers through bots, through sales teams, through marketing teams and your website. And the inconsistency there can actually bring a lot of risk in there as well. And I think that can make people quite nervous. So I think it's really driving that consistency through your communication as well, and making sure that buyers really do know how to go forward and understand the processes that, to buy and to do everything like that. And they can really trust that, if it feels messy, how can they trust that your product is going to be a really good and safe product for them to use if the journey feels messy?
Yeah, so trust is lost because nothing reassures the buyer enough to keep going. When teams do get this right, what's different?
I think you start to really reassure people. I think when it feels good, I know I've been through lots of different buying processes, and I think the ones where you do have that really good consistency, you've got that reassurance, you can find stuff easily. I think that makes things really different. And I think when buyers are not having to hunt for that proof, when you've got lots of, I just like social proof on your website and going, don't take it for what our sales team have. If this many customers want to talk about how much they love using the product, I think this is where community sites come in, if we're completely honest. G2 and things like that. Reviews are really important because that is where, let's be honest, what company website says or a sales person says, it's just not enough anymore. Especially depending on the price point of the software that you're buying, the solution as well, and the complexity of setting it up. Suddenly, you really do need to be reassured that it's right. And I think all of those things really help. And I just think, you can still have that momentum. You can still bring people through that, at speed and confidently. I think, you just need to, make sure that it is consistent and they are reassured going through that.
So, keeping that in mind, what do you feel is the biggest shift teams need to make today?
So for me, I think the biggest shift the teams need to make is really take that trust as a responsibility, build it in when you're doing all of your messaging. When you're going right along that journey, go test it. Go see how it feels, to go through that journey and how trusted it feels. How does the messaging feel? Is it too pushy? Is it customer led? Does it inspire confidence in the customer going through? And making sure that you're not putting any doubt into any of the messaging or any confusion in there. Clarity matters more than anything. If you're very clear on what you can do and what you can't do, let's be honest, any software that says it can do everything, I think it just grows a bit of suspicion in my book. So be really clear on what you can and can't do. And just to make sure that you're not going out there with those big promises that just you cannot deliver on.
And I'd like to add that once trust becomes something buyers actively test, the way teams use AI and automation gets examined far more closely.
Definitely. Yeah.
So that brings us to the third prediction, why AI maturity will be judged by outcomes, not claims. AI usage has become massive over the last 3 to 4 years, but what buyers are noticing more and more is when it's used in ways that make communication feel vague, generic, inauthentic, slightly off. Jenny, when you talk about AI maturity being judged by outcomes, what are buyers and customers actually reacting to?
We all can tell an AI generated piece of comms. I think because we're all using AI so much, and I don't mean people working in marketing, I mean everybody. My friends use it for everything on ChatGPT, so they can see how AI talks back to them in their personal lives. So that means that when they're out there, anyone out there buying software, we can really feel when AI is doing the talking. AI just does not understand what you do in the depth that it would need to authentically talk to your customer. Of course, you can use AI. Of course, marketing teams should be utilizing it to speed up their practices. And of course, it should be at the heart of how marketing teams and go-to-market teams work. But just be really careful when it comes to messaging. Just make sure that it's not just losing that, being really specific, and the tone starts to shift a little bit. And even, putting out the wrong information. We've all heard of those big cases when AI has given wrong information to customers, and it has caused them quite big problems. I think some airlines have encountered that themselves. So I think that's the bit that just being really, really careful on that. And it's they don't really mind. The customers don't mind that they're talking to chatbots anymore. They don't really mind about that, but they do mind if they're getting the right information or not. And I think that that's the really important bit for me. It's making sure that if they've asked a question and they've showed intent, that what they want to get back for that information is absolutely correct. And it's not just really generic and it's a blog post, written by AI. Does it actually tell them exactly what they need to know? And then because I think that's the bit where customers can start to disengage, whereas you go, oh, I can just, build up my customer journey purely through AI, and do it that way without actually going through the detail and making sure. So AI can absolutely help, but you have to have someone, ensuring that the customer journey is still absolutely the way it needs to be. And then it can just cause a little bit of distance as well. I think, if AI is the one at the front line talking to customers, you've just got to make sure that, well, how do you know what the customer is asking and what it needs and how you falling that back in? And we're not removed too far away because of AI from the customer as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's important to monitor that. Marketing teams never set out to damage that customer trust. They're just trying to move faster. So, where do you see AI crossing the line from helpful to harmful without, teams realizing it?
Yeah, I mean it's a massively difficult one for us to manage. What we're doing from a structural point of view, from embedding AI into how we work as a team. Every business needs to be more efficient, needs to look at all of those manual processes, needs to look how they can automate and do more with less. And I think that is the absolute amazing power of AI. And I know how excited everyone in our team is and how they're adopting it in the right way. And it's great. And automation is amazing and where it's taking us to. But let's just be careful that automation doesn't creep into the moments that do require really good judgment. And I think that's the bit that's important. And if you think about it in those one-to-one emails, that are really important, those one-to-one conversations, if there's too much AI in there, that can really feel inauthentic and that can erode trust, and really start to add friction into a customer journey. If there's a really complex conversation, if there's a follow-up to that, if situations where the tone will matter more than speed of getting back to someone, all of that kind of stuff. Just that's where adding too much in automation in, just, think about when you're doing that as well. Um, Bringing in so many tools. I think that's the bit that I know we're being really careful as a team, is that there's so many AI tools jumping up, like they're coming out of nowhere, and they can all do such amazing stuff. But then what that means is then you start losing that standardization. You start losing that consistency in how you talk to your customers, and different teams using AI in different ways and messaging coming out. And I think that becomes really visible to buyers, and they can really feel that as well. Because yes, you can, upload tone of voice, you can upload your brand into all of these different AI tools, but they will deal with that differently. They will still bring out a slightly different tone of voice, and I think that's where you've got to be really careful as well. And I just think the volume of communication coming out via AI can sometimes be a bit overwhelming for customers as well. So again, just those really considered customer journeys and the information that matters at the right time, and not overwhelming with too much information. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I use some of those AI chatbots, with banks, and it's like, did I give you the information that you needed? And it's like, no, absolutely not. So, it's back to that of, let's just, someone really owning that customer journey and utilizing AI in the right way to add value to the customer and not add friction.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about value. So you're saying that maturity isn't about how widely AI is used, it's about where it's used carefully. So what does disciplined AI for marketing teams actually look like in practice?
So the way we are looking at it as a team is that we're making really, really clear decisions about where AI belongs and where it doesn't. We're putting a lot of governance into how we bring this in, and that is not to slow the team down. I know governance is this word where it feels like that's going to be a blocker. It's actually an enabler. Because one of the things that the team asked for is they wanted really clear guidelines of how to use AI within the team. That was really important for them. So making sure that you're doing all of that, but enabling the team. So one of the things that we're doing at Exclaimer is that we're just looking at how people how they use AI, and actually how do we increase that usage at each level that everybody's at, and because just by increasing everybody from the super users of AI to the people who it's maybe more new for them, that's where your incremental gains will be. But really understanding in each team and along the customer journey where those manual processes are, where AI helps, and actually where it will increase the value, not just for the team, but for the customer. And I think that's really important as well. You must have people above this. You must have your marketing team has to still say accountable for anything customer facing. Now, there's different levels of that. What you don't want is to create, bottlenecks within production of messaging and content going out. But there's ones where, on that really top level customer journey where information really matters, especially where there is buying decision points being made, then there's absolutely got to be judgment on the information being correct for the customer there as well. Um, AI is not an authority. AI is helping. It is supporting your thinking, but it is absolutely not the authority. And I think, that's it. It can really help you speed up, but it is not responsible and it is not doing that strategic thinking. Let's not forget that it still hallucinates. If you ask it for three things, it will give you three things, whether they're all accurate or not, because you've asked it for three things. And I think there's that as well, where it is getting better and better, and it is amazing what it can speed up from, creative advertising assets to everything across the board. But you just have to make sure you're sensible of where and when you deploy AI. You've got to be really careful of where and when you deploy it. And I think where and when the customer can accept it. I think they don't mind at top of the funnel. We can all spot an AI ad now, but as long as it gives that kind of information. But when you're in the middle of the funnel and you're making decisions, you do not want AI generated content at that point.
Yeah, that definitely changes how marketing teams should think about success when implementing AI for their departments. So, like you said, if output and speed aren't the measures, what should marketing leaders be paying attention to instead?
Yeah, I think for me, it's whether we can speed up through AI, just communications feeling really clear and concise. And I think that's where, there's a lot there that we can get out as well. So I think it's speeding up the information we can get out, but ensuring that the clarity is still there. Can you still have confidence in what you're taking out to your buyers in the messaging that they are receiving as well? And I think it's whether AI can reduce doubt instead of creating it. I think that's the key bits of it is that when you do put AI out there from a customer facing role, can they actually bring the information they want and actually give the clarity to the customer that they need? And I think constantly testing that, Kyle, is really, really key. Don't roll something out and then not go through the journey and be testing AI yourself and how it is responding and the messages it's bringing out to customers. And I think that's really key as well.
And that leads perfectly into our final prediction for 2026, how compliance will shift from something that teams work around to something they rely on to move faster. So, prediction four, compliance gets a rebrand as growth's enabler. Most marketing teams don't struggle with compliance, they just ignore it. They struggle because it shows up late, usually when something needs approval fast or when risk suddenly becomes visible. Jenny, where do you see compliance creating the most friction for marketing teams today?
So for me, this one's maybe a bit left field. It's not going to be on many people's predictions, compliance and marketing. It's probably because this is actually at the heart of what we do at Exclaimer. We work very closely with very many regulated industries to ensure that what they're putting out there is compliant and safe, and we're taking the risk away. And with a lot of those companies, compliance is right at the heart of marketing. Everything from messaging has to go through compliance to make sure that they are safe in what they are putting out there from a messaging point of view. But it can feel like it's a blocker. It can feel like it's a constraint. They get there just before a campaign's about to go out when the pressure's the highest. The reviews are slow, it's a real bottleneck, and it feels really onerous. It feels like there's a gatekeeper and everything has to really slow down to go through that one point. And I think that's when it can feel, toughest for the marketing teams and causing the most friction.
Yeah, so that tension usually gets framed as speed versus control, but you've said in 2026 compliance starts to work differently. What do you mean by that?
That's when I think about it, it needs a little bit of a rebrand. When I think about similar things where IT always felt like a bit of a bottleneck, and then they turned in to be IT business partners. And, same with HR, they became HR business partners and they came in to help, really partner with you to do it differently. And I think that's where compliance is going to be heading for marketers in 2026. I think they're going to be working together and become enablers. And I think that's where it needs a little bit of a rebrand from my point of view. And it's maybe, we're starting to talk about it as brand governance. That's how we kind of, talk about it internally. And it's the standards replace that constant decision making. You've put those standards out. You don't, okay, there's maybe going to be edge cases, but you almost know what you're able to do and not do. It doesn't always have to go through one single person or back to a team. You start to put in guardrails a little bit like the way we have done with our AI automation. It's like, here's your safety guardrails and how you do it, and here's guidance instead of rework. And then the ownership is distributed, it's not centralized. Everyone in the team is trained up on compliance. They all understand it to the level that they, in each team, like in the advertising team, they know exactly what they're able to do. And that's probably where, AI, you can have internal AI have a database internally of those rules, and people can go and ask, what am I allowed to do, what am I not allowed to do, and that's where there's a real cleverness to make sure that you're actually putting that out more cleverly to the marketing team. And as I say, it's compliance enablement.
That sounds very different from how most marketing teams experience compliance. For all the marketing leaders listening right now, what does this look like when it's actually working?
It's just fewer approvals. You're got that less of that back and forth. When you've written something that's correct the first time. Simple, you can scale. You can just go quicker, knowing that you're compliant in every message that you're putting out there. Audit trails, you're not going to be as worried about them because they don't need explaining as much. And that having that compliance testing maybe built out, that you maybe got something that you can test, a message through to make sure it's compliant becomes the norm. And I think that's where, you just start to level up from a compliance point of view and you can be compliant and go faster.
So, compliance speeds things up by removing uncertainty. If there's one mindset shift marketing teams need to make here, what is it?
I would say compliance isn't a blocker. It's the confidence system. It's those guardrails that we talked about earlier. It means that you're not guessing yourself, you're going faster. You're not worried that it's going to be you that makes mistakes. So you want to shift that responsibility onto someone else, because we've put everything in place to give you the confidence to put that messaging out. I think for me, trust just becoming that thing that teams rely on, not hope for. So they know what the standards are, they know what it looks like, they know that everything they put out there is credible. And you can do that, and that credibility increases in what you're putting out there because you've got a really well-trained team and how you talk about what you do with compliance built into that.
So that completes the picture. When buyers are controlled, trust is judged early, AI is under scrutiny, and communication is happening everywhere. The teams that move fastest are the ones with clarity, not the ones cutting corners. And that's why compliance, when done properly, ends up enabling growth rather than slowing it down.
Absolutely. And it's just really exciting to see the change that's coming this year. And you can see that AI is at the heart of everything we talked about this year. So when I say that this is the year that AI really is embedded in everything you do in marketing, I think just everything we talked about, I don't think I said anything that we didn't have AI mentioned as an enabler to do it.
Well, we're nearly at time, so let's wrap things up. What today's conversation really shows is that marketing in 2026 isn't about doing more, it's about removing the things that quietly slow buyers down. Most risks don't show up as complaints or objections. It shows up as hesitation, extra internal checks, or deals that take longer than they should. If you remember one thing from this session, it's this. The biggest risk for marketing teams isn't getting something wrong, it's leaving doubt unresolved. Buyers rarely say they're unsure, they slow down or disengage. That's why the teams that move fastest are the ones that remove uncertainty early through clear, consistent communication. So I just want to say thank you, Jenny, for sharing your perspective, and thanks to everyone who joined us.
Thanks so much. It was a really great discussion. I'm very excited about 2026.
Yeah, me too. So, yeah, we'll send out the recording shortly, along with a few related resources if you'd like to explore these ideas further. Thanks again for your time. We'll see you on the next webinar.